where the new flats were now appearing. Was he also the cause of their move? Were they expelled from society on his account? Thence to a public library, but could find no satisfactory Schlegel in the directory. On the morrow he searched again. He hung about outside Mr. Wilcox's office at lunch-time, and as the clerks came out, said, "Excuse me, sir, but is your boss married?" Most of them stared. Some said, "What's it to you?" But one, who had not yet acquired reticence, told him what he wished. Leonard could not learn the private address. That necessitated more trouble with directories and tubes. Ducie Street was not discovered until Monday, the day that Margaret and her husband went down on their hunting expedition to Howard's End. He called at about 4 o'clock. The weather had changed, and the sun shone gaily on the ornamental steps, black and white marble in triangles. Leonard lowered his eyes to them after ringing the bell. He felt in curious health. Doors seemed to be opening and shutting inside his body, and he had been obliged to sleep sitting up in bed, with his back propped against the wall. When the parlour-maid came, he could not see her face. The brown rain had descended suddenly. "Does Mrs. Wilcox live here?" "She's out," was the answer. "When will she be back?" "I'll ask," said the parlour-maid. Margaret had given instructions that no one who mentioned her name should ever be rebuffed. Putting the door on the chain, for Leonard's appearance demanded this, she went through to the smoking room, which was occupied by Tibby. Tibby was asleep. He had a good lunch. Charles Wilcox had not yet rung him up for the distracting interview. He said drowsily, "I don't know. Hilton, Howard's End." "Who is it?" "I'll ask, sir." "No, don't bother." "They've taken the car to Howard's End," said the parlour-maid to Leonard. He thanked her, and asked whereabouts that place was. "You appear to want to know a great deal," she remarked. But Margaret had forbidden her to be mysterious. She told him against her better judgment that Howard's End was in Hertfordshire. "Is it a village, please?" "Village? It's Mr. Wilcox's private house. At least it's one of them. Mrs. Wilcox keeps her furniture there. Hilton is the village." "Yes, and when will they be back?" "Mr. Schlegel doesn't know. We can't know everything, can we?" She shut him out and went to attend to the telephone, which was ringing furiously. He loitered away another night of agony. Confession grew more difficult. As soon as possible he went to bed. He watched a patch of moonlight cross the floor of their lodging, and, as sometimes happens when the mind is overtaxed, he fell asleep for the rest of the room, but kept awake for the patch of moonlight. Horrible. Then began one of those disintegrating dialogues. Part of him said, "Why horrible? It's ordinary light from the room." "But it moves." "So does the moon." "But it is a clenched fist." "Why not?" "But it is going to touch me." "Let it." And seeming to gather motion, the patch ran up his blanket. Presently a blue snake appeared, then another parallel to it. "Is there life in the moon?" "Of course." "But I thought it was uninhabited." "Not by time, death, judgment, and the smaller snakes." "Smaller snakes," said Leonard indignantly and aloud. "What a notion!" By a rending effort of the will he woke the rest of the room up. Jackie, the bed, their food, their clothes on the chair, gradually entered his consciousness, and the horror vanished outwards, like a ring that is spreading through water. "I say, Jackie, I'm going out for a bit." She was breathing regularly. The patch of light fell clear of the striped blanket and began to cover the shawl that lay over her feet. Why had he been afraid? He went to the window and saw that the moon was descending through a clear sky. He saw her volcanoes in the bright expanses that a gracious air has named seas. They paled, for the sun, who had lit them up, was coming to light the earth. Sea of serenity, sea of tranquillity, ocean of the lunar storms, merged into one lucent drop, itself to slip into the sempiternal dawn. And then he had been afraid of the moon. He dressed among the contending lights and went through his money. It was running low again, but enough for a return ticket to Hilton. As it clinked, Jackie opened her eyes. "Hello, Len. What ho, Len?" What ho, Jackie, see you later. She turned over and slept. The house was unlocked, their landlord being a salesman at Covent Garden. Leonard passed out and made his way down to the station. The train, though it did not start for an hour, was already drawn up at the end of the platform, and he lay down in it and slept. With the first jolt he was in daylight. They had left the gateways of King's Cross and were under blue skies. Tunnels followed, and after each the sky grew bluer. And from the embankment at Finsbury Park he had his first sight of the sun. It rolled along behind the eastern smokes, a wheel whose fellow was the descending sun, and as yet it seemed the servant of the blue sky was not its lord. He dozed again. Over the Tewin water it was day. To the left fell the shadow of the embankment and its arcs to the right. Leonard saw up into the Tewin woods and towards the church, with its wild legend of immortality. 6 forest trees, that is a fact, grow out of one in the graves of Tewin churchyard. The grave's occupant, that is the legend, is an atheist who declared that if God existed, 6 forest trees would grow out of her grave. These things in Hertfordshire, and farther afield lay the house of a hermit. Mrs. Wilcox had known him, who barred himself up, and wrote prophecies, and gave all he had to the poor, while powdered in between were the villas of business men, who saw life more steadily, though with the steadiness of the half-closed eye. Over all the sun was streaming, to all the birds were singing, to all the primroses were yellow, and the speedwell blue, and the country, however they interpreted her, was uttering her cry of now. She did not free Leonard yet, and the knife plunged deeper into his heart as the train drew up at Hilton. But remorse had become beautiful. Hilton was asleep, or at the earliest breakfasting. Leonard noticed the contrast when he stepped out of it into the country. Here men had been up since dawn. Their hours were ruled not by a London office, but by the movements of the crops in the sun. That they were men of the finest type only the sentimentalist can declare, but they kept to the life of daylight. They are England's hope. Clumsily they carry forward the torch of the sun until such time as the nation sees fit to take it up. Half clodhopper, half board school prig, they could still throw back to a nobler stock and breed yeomen. At the chalk pit a motor passed him. In it was another type, whom nature favours, the imperial. Healthy, ever in motion, it hopes to inherit the earth. It breeds as quickly as the yeoman, and as soundly. Strong is the temptation to acclaim it as a super-yeoman who carries his country's virtue overseas. But the imperialist is not what he thinks or seems. He is a destroyer. He prepares the way for cosmopolitanism, and though his ambitions may be fulfilled, the earth that he inherits will be grey. To Leonard, intent on his private sin, there came the conviction of innate goodness elsewhere. It was not the optimism which he had been taught at school. Again and again must the drums tap and the goblins stalk over the universe before joy can be purged of the superficial. It was rather paradoxical, and arose from his sorrow. Death destroys a man, but the idea of death saves him. That is the best account of it that has yet been given. Squalor and tragedy can beckon to all that is great in us, and strengthen the wings of love. They can beckon. It is not certain that they will, for they are not love's servants, but they can beckon, and the knowledge of this incredible truth comforted him. As he approached the house, all thought stopped. Contradictory notions stood side by side in his mind. He was terrified but happy, ashamed but had done no sin. He knew the confession. "Mrs. Wilcox, I have done wrong." But sunrise had robbed its meaning, and he felt rather on a supreme adventure. He entered a garden, steadied himself against a motor car that he found in it, found a door open, and entered a house. Yes, it would be very easy. From a room to the left he heard voices, Margaret's amongst them. His own name was called aloud, and a man whom he had never seen said, "Oh, is he here? I am not surprised.